Under a dark Afghan sky, September 17, 2010, at a remote patrol base in Bajabi, Helmand, the night was alive with the relentless roar of gunfire. Sergeant Diprasad Pun crouched behind the sandbags of his rooftop position, alone in the fortified Sangar. The elevated post had become the epicenter of a fierce assault. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness from all sides as Pun returned fire, one soldier against an advancing force of Taliban fighters. He heard a scraping sound, faint but growing louder. Someone was climbing the tower. Pun snapped his head to the noise, his pulse spiking. A Taliban soldier was pulling himself up. Sergeant Pun's heart raced. With fierce precision, he lined up the shot, squeezed the trigger, and dropped him. Before he could take a second to think, another Taliban fighter was almost already on the roof, his AK-47 ready at hand and aimed at Pun. Pun swung his rifle toward him. Click. Nothing. But it would take more than an empty weapon to stop a Gurkha warrior. A history of valor and violence. Field Marshal Viscount Slim once said, quote, "The Almighty created in the Gurkhas an ideal infantryman, indeed an ideal rifleman. Brave, tough, patient, adaptable, skilled in fieldcraft, intensely proud of his military record, and unswerving loyalty." From the steep hillsides of Nepal came these legendary warriors, who first proved their mettle against the British East India Company in the Anglo-Nepalese War. Their combat prowess so impressed their British adversaries that they were soon invited to join the ranks of the British Army, beginning a partnership that would span centuries. Their courage continued through the Indian Rebellion of 1857, where they played a decisive role in suppressing the uprising, and into the Second Anglo-Afghan War, where their resilience in the mountains made them an unstoppable force. During World War I, over 200,000 Gurkhas served, earning countless Victoria Crosses and solidifying their status as one of history's most feared and respected military forces. Among these legendary warriors stood rifleman Tul Bahadur Pun. On June 23, 1944, near the railway bridge at Mogwang, Burma, his platoon faced withering fire from a position known as the Red House and surrounding bunkers. As his section was decimated around him, Pun seized a Bren gun and charged alone across 30 yards of open ground, mud-soaked and strewn with shell holes. The air thundered with enemy fire as he sprinted through the debris, firing from the hip with unrelenting precision. Upon reaching the bunker, he neutralized 3 enemy soldiers and sent 5 more fleeing, capturing 2 machine guns and turning them against the very forces that had once pinned him down. For his actions that day, Tul Bahadur Pun received the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor. 66 years later, on another battlefield, thousands of miles from Mogwang, his grandson would face a similar moment of truth. There were many. I was alone. In 2010, the Royal Gurkha Rifles were among the coalition forces battling through Helmand Province's maze of compounds and irrigation ditches. Their mission was critical: secure the volatile regions where Taliban fighters moved like shadows between villages, ensuring safety for the approaching parliamentary elections that could shape Afghanistan's future. Acting Sergeant Diprasad Pun followed a path laid by generations before him. At 31 years old, the 5'7" soldier of the 1st Battalion, Royal Gurkha Rifles, represented the 3rd generation of his family to serve. Like his father and his decorated grandfather before him, Pun had dedicated his life to the regiment's proud tradition of service. Under the orange glow of the Afghan evening on September 17, 2010, Pun's platoon had pushed out along the road east of their checkpoint, securing the route for the upcoming parliamentary elections. By nightfall, only 4 soldiers remained at the southern compound. The quiet belied the tension crackling in the air. Inside the compound, behind walls of sun-baked mud brick and concrete, the men took turns manning a solitary Sangar perched atop the roof, where sandbag positions and mounted weapons offered some protection against the dangers lurking in the darkness. The elevated position commanded a view of the surrounding terrain. But the Sangar's prominence made it both vital and vulnerable. In the darkness, it stood outlined against the star-filled sky, a fact that weighed heavily on each man who took his turn at watch. Later that night, Sergeant Pun took over the watch. Clutching his SA-80 rifle, He scanned the terrain through the shadows cast by the crescent moon. Then it came, a suspicious noise, faint yet distinct, from the darkness beyond the southern gate. He later recalled, quote, "I thought at first maybe it was a cow." But the sound was deliberate, rhythmic, and far too calculated for wandering livestock. The suspicion coiling in his gut was soon confirmed. He spotted shapes in the darkness, crouched low, digging. They weren't farmers. They were Taliban insurgents, laying an improvised explosive device directly in front of the compound gate. Pun's training kicked in with lightning precision. He snatched up the L7A2 general-purpose machine gun and a handful of grenades, as well as 2 radios, one to coordinate with his commander, the other for calling artillery, and shouldered his weapon. Heart pounding, he steadied his breathing. He knew this was no reconnaissance mission. It was the prelude to an attack. He would later recount, quote, "Suddenly I noticed there were many Taliban surrounding that checkpoint in position to attack. I opened fire on them, and we fired at each other. There were many. I was alone." Orange muzzle flashes pierced the darkness, shattering the night's stillness. Automatic weapons fire raked the Sanger as Pun returned fire in controlled bursts. His grenade launcher coughed out a 40mm explosive round that arced into the darkness, detonating in a flash that threw enemy silhouettes into stark relief. The Taliban fighters scrambled for cover, their yells sharp and panicked. Pun later admitted being scared, sure the Taliban would take his life. He recalled, quote, "But as soon as I started firing, that feeling went away." In seconds, the firefight turned brutal. 30 insurgents surrounded the checkpoint, armed with AK-47s and rocket-propelled grenades. Their rockets screamed through the air, pounding the compound walls and shaking the earth beneath Pun's feet. He gritted his teeth and returned fire, moving between firing points like a ghost. The general-purpose machine gun rattled in his hands, the recoil kicking into his shoulder as he emptied belts of ammunition at any movement he detected. An insurgent climbed over the outer wall, his movement swift and desperate. Pun fired a 3-round burst, the rounds finding their mark. Still, the enemy pressed in from 3 sides, their assault relentless. Pun darted between positions, narrowly dodging the deafening explosion of a rocket-propelled grenade that tore into the Sanger. He rolled to his feet, heart pounding, and squeezed the trigger again. The machine gun roared, shredding the air as another magazine emptied, the spent brass casings clattering to the ground. Through his radio, he could hear his commander's voice, coordinating reinforcements and artillery support, but survival demanded his complete attention. Every shot he fired, every grenade he launched, was an effort to keep the compound from falling. Suddenly, the machine gun's steady roar faltered, its last round spent. Without hesitation, Pun unleashed a storm of grenades, alternating between white phosphorus and fragmentation rounds. The night erupted in blinding flashes, each detonation rocking the battlefield. The shockwaves rippled outward, scattering debris and rattling the air. He was fighting with everything he had, refusing to yield an inch. He aimed, fired, and moved with relentless determination, shifting from cover to cover, forcing the insurgents to adapt to his chaos. The Taliban fighters, emboldened by their numbers, kept rushing the compound in coordinated waves. They moved like shadows through the phosphorus smoke, their weapons gleaming in the intermittent flashes of explosion and gunfire. Their shouts echoed across the battlefield as they attempted to overwhelm the lone defender through sheer force of numbers. As the battle raged on, Pun's mind cleared to a singular focus. With enemies surrounding him on all sides, he resolved that if these were to be his final moments, he would make them count. Spotting a cluster of Taliban fighters regrouping, he lobbed a high-explosive grenade into their midst. The blast scattered, sending them fleeing into the chaos of white phosphorus smoke and shadows. Then Pun's ears rang with the sound of boots scraping up the roof. A Taliban insurgent pulled himself onto the ledge, AK-47 pointing right at the lone defender of the Sanger. Pun reacted instantly, pulling his SA-80 into position. His sights aligned, finger tightening on the trigger. One smooth pull, the round slammed home, dropping the fighter. Before he could process, another insurgent appeared, climbing with frantic speed. Pun's rifle snapped up again, targeting the new threat. his breath slowed, his finger tightening once more, ready to neutralize the next enemy. Click. The rifle jammed. The Taliban fighter's eyes widened as he swung his weapon to fire. Pun, undeterred, dropped the malfunctioning rifle and snatched the machine gun's heavy steel tripod from the deck. Without hesitation, he collapsed the 16-pound mount's legs with a sharp snap and swung it in a vicious arc. The steel frame smashed into the insurgent's face with bone-crunching force. The man staggered, crumpling to the ground in a lifeless heap. Pun didn't stop to assess. He spun, already scanning for the next attacker. Pun pivoted, unloading the last of his ammunition into 2 more attackers at point-blank range. Pun sprinted to the edge of the building, heart racing, just as the last of the attacking force started scaling the walls, illuminated by the flickering white phosphorus burning below. Without hesitation, Pun grabbed a nearby sandbag and hurled it into the chaos. The 40-pound sack crashed into one fighter's head, sending him tumbling, his body taking down others in a tangled heap. In the same fluid motion, Pun reached for his final weapon, a claymore mine, primed and ready. He triggered it with a soft pull of the cord, and the violent eruption of ball bearings tore through the attackers, ripping through flesh and bone. The few remaining Taliban fighters, bloodied and broken, turned and fled into the darkness, their morale shattered by the ferocity of the Gurkhas' defense. The battle had shifted in Pun's favor. A humble one-man terror. The firefight raged for 17 excruciating minutes, the air thick with smoke and the acrid stench of gunpowder. By the end, the ground surrounding the compound bore silent testimony to the intensity of the fight. In those 17 minutes, Sergeant Pun had fired 250 rounds from his general-purpose machine gun, 180 from his SA-80, and launched 17 grenades, along with the claymore mine. The machine gun tripod and sandbag stood as improvised weapons of last resort. His actions were later recognized with the Conspicuous Gallantry Cross, second only to the Victoria Cross in Britain's honors for military valor. His medal citation captured the essence of that night. Quote, Pun could never know how many enemies were attempting to overcome his position, but he sought them out from all angles despite the danger, consistently moving towards them to reach the best position of attack. The official commendation noted that his actions had saved the lives of 3 comrades inside the checkpoint, preventing the position from being overrun. Yet when asked about his extraordinary feat, Pun remained characteristically humble. He later reflected, quote, I think I'm a very lucky guy, a survivor. Now I am getting this award. It is very great, and I am very happy.